Okay, so adding lights to a tractor might seem easy, but from my experience, it's not. The reason is it's a harsh environment and material selection is key. Here's my first attempt. I tried to pick inexpensive lights that did not draw a lot of current. The end result was that I put too many on that I didn't need and the wires broke apart from the vibration. Here was my second attempt. I bought much higher quality lights with much thicker wires. I literally bolted them straight to the top and sides. This worked great, except the top light partially got broken off from hitting stuff, and the sweeper lights totally got ripped off from getting caught on stuff. These lights were on the same key as the main headlights, so I could never control when they were on and off. So here's my third attempt. I did a full-blown vehicular wiring with loom, lots of stress relief, zip tying the snot of it, and I put a second connector on so I could detach it from the hood. I also have a relay on here so that when I turn the tractor engine off, the lights I added are forced to turn off. So I'm making brackets here to attach the light to. I learned from the first two attempts that bolting directly to the plastic is a bad idea due to vibration. All the plastic eventually cracked from my first two attempts. So this way I'm spreading out the load across multiple areas of the plastic in two different ways. I also learned from my first two attempts that I really only need two lights, a better front headlight and one pointing back at the corner of the deck. Those two lights will give enough ambient light around the tractor that I can see no matter what direction I'm going or what I'm looking at. So here what I'm doing is I'm using giant 1/4-inch diameter pop rivets. This is a pneumatic pop rivet gun because those types of pop rivets are so big it's literally impossible to do by hand. Amy is on the inside of the hood putting a washer on, so the pop rivet's actually pulling against a washer rather than pinching against the plastic. I learned from the first two attempts that pop riveting in the plastic is a bad idea straight up. By using a washer, you pinch the plastic between the metal bracket and a washer, and thereby this will work much better. Now when I put these lights on, I put the adjustment angle screws loose so that I could fine tune it once I had the whole setup working in the dark. So I grew up using crimp connectors and wiring playing around in my dad's shop. It's probably one of the big reasons I ended up becoming an electrical engineer. If you aren't familiar with a typical way to splice wiring together, I showed the full sequence here once. The basic process is you strip the wire, you twist it tight, you trim it to about 1/4 inch in length, you put it into the crimp connector, and then you crimp it. Then you put shrink wrap over it to protect the connectors, and I'm using the type that has glue on the inside, which makes it about as impervious to water as you can possibly make it. I'm also using shrink wrap here wherever I can't use loom to protect the wires, like in this case through a hole. I'm probably going to have this tractor for at least another 6 to 10 years, and so I don't want to have to repair any of this wiring, so I'm doing it right to vehicular standards. This way the wire is actually loose inside the loom, and the loom takes the brunt of the vibration and wear, which is a much tougher material than the outside of a wire. I'm attaching the light wires to one side of the relay, and then I'm using the original headlight wires to drive the relay open and closed. The tractor regular headlights will turn off when I turn the key off, and that's how I use the relay to control when the front headlights can get power. Not connectorizing the added headlights was another lesson learned from the first attempt. This is one half of the connector that I'm installing on the hood to allow me to disconnect the hood and literally take it off the tractor. If I didn't connectorize it, then I wouldn't be able to do that, and it's really handy for maintenance. Had I used the quick disconnect that came with the tractor, I wouldn't be able to control when the big headlights were on and off. By adding a second connector, I can put a switch up near the steering wheel that controls the second set of headlights, and that's the way I want it. I'm not kidding. James literally spent a half hour running around with this loom cable and spinning it and having a good old time. So I didn't film the part of the video where I snaked the two wires for the switch and in the loom back behind the gas tank. Basically, I just stuck my hand in from the top and bottom and found a way to route it, and James helped me kind of pull it through. There's really nothing to show on video, so I just skipped filming that part. Tacos. So this part I didn't show a whole lot of wiring other than this portion right here, and the reason is that mostly the reason for being up on the jack stands was to do all the wiring underneath. That was literally impossible to film because it's such tight quarters. So later in this video, I show a complete follow through with the camera from the battery all the way underneath, up to the engine, forward to the hood, and up to the switch. That way it can kind of make sense. I'll also put a picture and a little discussion on a schematic of how I added the wiring for those that are interested at the end of the video that explains how this setup actually works. You'll see here, since I'm running directly off the battery, I installed a fuse to prevent any damage or fires. The fuse size is determined by the current draw of the lights. In my case, I calculated the two lights should draw about 5 or 6 amps, so I put a 10 amp fuse. Plenty of margin there, but if something bad should happen, definitely it would blow the fuse. I always joke with my kids that they are the quote-unquote official testers. So whenever I build something, I always let them try it first. So here James is the official tester today, trying out the lights and switches. So here I'll show the whole wiring setup. It starts at the battery, goes through a fuse, goes underneath the seat through a hole in the pan. So So on the underside, I just followed the exact same path that the wiring on the other side did when Cub Cadet built the tractor. It snakes through the frame rail, behind all the pedals and stuff, so it won't get caught on anything, and it comes back up where the existing wiring all joins together. And then this is where it goes both up to the switch by the steering wheel to turn it on and off. And it also goes down along the existing light wiring up to the connector I installed. And of course, what switch would be complete without a silly label? So here I'm aiming the side sweeper headlight to point just past the left-hand edge of the deck, which is the side I use to get really close to stuff. I'm adjusting both the angle and the rotation, so you can see how I had to kind of tighten it. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video. Do you think they'll enjoy it?
Yeah!
So the point of this light here is so I can see where I'm cutting close with the mower deck. The other light's just for forward. I had 6 lights on my first mower and it was overkill. This is all you really need. These lights give off enough ambient that you can really see all around the tractor. This is just for extra. The reason it's mounted here and not somewhere else is that when I had one last time, I had them down here and they got ripped off. Then I had them up there and they got ripped off. So I have it inside, you know, like that light's inside the outer edge of the hood. So there you go. The reason I added the relay was so that when you turn the switch off, go ahead, there you go. So when you turn the ignition switch off, the relay lets go and it turns the big lights off too so you don't kill the battery. You want to turn it back on? And then you can turn the big headlights off. Go ahead and hit the big switch. So you can turn the big lights off during the day so you don't just waste energy, because I don't know how long this battery is going to last. It's about 80 watts total, so that's not terrible. So you want to turn it back on? So anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye. Okay, so let's talk about how this thing works. So first, let me talk a little bit about how the existing system works so you can see how I tacked onto it. So here's our main large battery in the tractor underneath the driver's seat. So the power from that goes into some unknown wiring. I don't really care. Bottom line is that it comes up to the tractor ignition key here, and it has 3 basic positions. Off, nothing happens. On, which is run here, that turns on the headlights, and to start, where it cranks the engine. So all we care about is run. In the run position, here's our 2 stock headlights, and they get power. And so these headlights on this tractor are always turned on. The wires that go to the hood are sent in a bundle in a loom along the frame to a connector, which I kind of pointed out here, factory disconnect connector here, and then up to the 2 headlights. So this dotted line kind of represents the tractor side, and this dotted line here represents what's in the hood. So you can kind of see this no man's land here is really just 4 wires. Ground and headlight power from somewhere in the wiring harness, probably the key. And then the 2 wires that I added, which is 12 volts from the battery and ground from the battery. It's important to understand too that on all vehicles, cars or tractors, whatever, usually the battery is just tied to the frame rail, which is referred to on my diagram as chassis ground. You could shoot a ground log right into the frame, but I've learned in the past that that's problematic because once things start to rust, you can have a bad ground and blah, 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 blah. The ideal way to run power is always straight off the battery, so that's what I did. The reason I didn't use the power from the headlights is that I know that the fuse for those headlights is probably very low. The headlights I'm adding draw a significant amount of power compared to those cheap, teeny little headlights. It would probably blow the fuse. The tractor circuitry isn't meant for powering auxiliary lights, so I ran my own power. So let's talk about that. Here's my front light bar, and here's my mower deck light. That's all I got. So those 2 are tied in parallel and come back to a relay switch. We'll talk about that in a minute. The power continues on to the slam and headlight switch up by the steering wheel. It goes through a 10 amp fuse and goes back to the battery. And then again, ground comes for that is also straight from the battery. So what's the point of this relay here? If I didn't have it, then I could potentially turn the tractor engine off, walk away, and leave the headlights on, thereby draining the battery. That was one of the lessons learned from the last 2 battery installs on the old John Deere, is that I kept forgetting it. I never ran the battery up, but I kept forgetting it, and it was just a nuisance. So I thought it'd be better to just get all fancy here. A relay is like $4. This relay cost me like $4. So how does the relay work? Very simple. This is the coil that pulls the relay switch on and off. That's what this symbol represents, and this represents the switch inside the relay. So when the coil sees 12 volts, when the main headlights are on, it pushes that switch shut, thereby allowing power to go to the headlights if I desire them to be on with the steering column switch. When you put the tractor key to the off position, because these headlights turn off, the coil loses power and thereby automatically prevents the headlights from being on by opening that relay. When you're buying a relay, make sure you check the current rating of the contacts to make sure they can pass enough current. In my case, I calculated the amount of current and knew that a 20 amp would be sufficient. Usually you buy twice or more what you really need, that way there's no accidents. How did I come up with the 10 amp fuse? No, I didn't make it up out of thin air. I did a little bit of math. So the auxiliary disconnect that I put in with the bracket so that I can take the hood off is right here. So again, it's just the 2 grounds, negative and positive. So I hope this kind of makes sense to you. Let me show you how I did the math. Right back. So how did I come up with that fuse of 10 amps? Here you go. The main light bar specifications are 63 watts. The mower deck light was rated at 12 watts. It said that right on the side of them. My total load is 75 watts. Engineers do what's called derating, where you calculate extra margin when you don't know the true temperature performance. Most engineers only characterize temperature in extreme cases. In general, we just usually add 20 to 40%. So for the purpose of this exercise, I think since the temperature swing's not that great because it's going to be typical Midwest weather, 20% is sufficient. So 75 watts times 1.2, so 120% is 90 watts. Power equals voltage times current, therefore current equals power over voltage. Ergo, the current equals 90 divided by 12 or 7.5 amps. So under the worst case condition that I can think of, I would need a 7.5 amp fuse. Now those don't exist. The next higher value is 10. So I think a 10 amp fuse will be fine. The relay contacts are rated at 20 amps. I'm probably going to be drawing 6 amps or so. A 10 amp fuse under normal circumstances will never blow. So what's the fuse for? Well, what if the positive wire gets rubbed thin and shorts against the frame or shorts to something else? That's when the fuse is going to blow. It's protecting from a fire. Whenever you run off the battery, make sure you always put a fuse in somewhere. Nobody wants any fires. So I hope this makes sense. Thank you for bearing through my boring schematic, but if you really want to do it the way I did, you kind of have to go through this learning process. So I hope I did a good job of making some nice drawings. I hope the fuse calculations make sense. If I come back to this drawing here, I would like to touch on one other thing. You see here, magneto enable. The way that a garden tractor turns off is very simple. The magneto is what creates electricity to charge the battery. Its primary purpose, though, really is to create voltage for the spark plug. So the way a tractor is turned off is that they ground the magneto, and so when it produces a pulse of energy, instead of going into the spark plug wire, it drains straight into the chassis, which drains back to the battery, and basically you get no output. So you're cutting the spark. I have no idea how much current that magneto can generate, but something tells me it doesn't generate 7.5 amps. It's probably a lot lower than that. Because keep in mind, beyond the spark, the only electricity that magneto is designed to generate is like 5 watts for the front headlights. It's not designed to run a large current load. I'm sure the battery on your tractor has plenty of capacity to run those headlights for a couple of hours while it's slowly going down. Like I said, I don't really know. If the headlights start getting dim, just turn them off. I added these headlights. It's not really for cutting grass. It's for plowing snow. The other big issue is leaf pickup. It gets really dark really early this time of year, and often it's not convenient to pick up leaves when it's bright out because I'm at work. So that's why I put lights in the last tractor, was so I could pick up leaves around 6 or 7 o'clock at night. Having the headlights for snow plowing, I've learned the last 2 winters with this new tractor, are really a must. Those little dinky headlights the tractor comes with aren't worth a darn. The John Deere had much better headlights, but still not that great. So after plowing the snow with a headlamp on last winter, I decided that I was going to upgrade to really what that tractor should have been equipped with. So I hope you enjoyed that explanation too, and see you on the next video. Thank you very much for watching. Bye-bye.